As finding enough people to fully staff our summer programs continues to be one of the biggest challenges facing the camp industry today, there is one population that may be able to form the core of your future staffers. On today's episode, we discuss what you can do this summer to prepare your current campers to be stellar staffers in the future.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their kids, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine. And we need to help each other bring our very best. Today, we'll be tackling the question, when do we really begin leadership training? How early we're recommending may surprise you. And to dig into this important subject, we have someone with us today who has been MIA for the past several episodes, and we could not be more excited that she's back. So I am very happy to say, let's start by introducing ourselves. Ruby.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Ruby Compton. I'm the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors. I am a supporter and friend of camp, and I work primarily with camps that are in Western North Carolina, but also with camps all over the world. And typically I'm coming to you from Western North Carolina near Asheville, but currently broadcasting from Salem, Oregon.
Very exciting. And we're super happy to have you back. Welcome home. All right,
Thanks.
Gabz, how about you?
My name is Gabz, best friend of Ruby, and I work at Campfire, which is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are also she, her. As a camp consultant and trainer, I work building things off of my 43 years at summer camp. And my passion, of course, is solid, supportive, and purposeful communities that we can build together through intentional and thoughtful leadership training. All right, hooray, hooray, Ruby is back. The team is back together. We are so grateful that we're all three of us here today. So let's dive in. We have talked a lot about how and where to find staff in the last couple of months, and it seems to be an issue for everybody. We would like to propose that you can start to lay the groundwork for developing future leaders as early as those very first years with campers. So let's first begin by sharing our why on this topic. Why should we begin thinking about future staff members from the very first moment a new camper arrives at camp? What's the point? Why don't we just let kids be kids? So Gabz, let's start with you.
We do need to let kids be kids. Kids have to be children, and but children are there to grow and to learn, how to be kind to each other and learn how to speak up for themselves. And these are the foundation that we need to teach children. And of course, that foundational base can be an optimal base for any staff member that comes in. I think the other reason why we want to focus on looking at our campers as potential future staff members is because if we get that into their muscle memory, if we teach them to speak up for themselves at a young age, if we teach them to empathize with others, then when they become staff members, this is part of muscle memory. They're already going to be able to do that within the team setting. And then once they're on staff, that's when we start teaching them the why. As campers, we don't need to teach them necessarily the why.
Great start there, Gabz. All right, Ruby, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. To echo what Gab said, the idea that kids are malleable, right? And we say all the time, wouldn't it be great if the world was more like camp? And it so much starts with our campers going out and experiences that they have at camp. Maybe they've been treated a way a way they've never, in a good way been treated, or they've been able to tackle new skills, or just like put on a whole new persona. That's one of the beauties of camp. It allows kids to do all that stuff. And I think when they get a chance to try stuff like trying leadership, then they can go back into their communities and carry those skills over. So kids are malleable, and they also like kids like having jobs, right? Because
Yes.
all they know is that their job is to like go to school and then like to have fun, and so it's that thing that we all know as camp directors, that when you have the camper that is challenging you, that when we can give them a specific job, how often that really helps out. And when we feel like we have purpose, that really helps folks do more and be more connected to their surroundings. So these are skills that, let's be real, like leadership can be learned. And how much better are you going to be at something if you've been learning it since you were 5 or 6 than if you try to start learning it when you're 19 or 20? I mean, I used to referee little kids basketball. Let me tell you, the kids who start when they're 5 years old, they are really good basketball players by the time they're 8. And so wouldn't it be cool if we could do that with leadership too?
Very cool. Okay, so we know the importance of why, but how? Where do we
Mm.
start? No doubt many of you are already offering leadership opportunities all day at camp without even knowing it, without even actually having sat down to think about it. But what if you did? What if you sat down and put the effort into being really intentional about it? For me, it's all about planning it out with intention and then consistently executing it, not only through the summer, but throughout the school year as well. So I would suggest that you take some time in the coming months to brainstorm 2 categories. One, the leadership skills you're looking for future staff, but also for future community and world leaders. After all, not all of our campers are going to become staff at our camps, but they all have the potential to learn leadership skills that will help make the world a better place. And that's our job as camp directors. And then 2, brainstorm some age appropriate activities for all of your camper age groups that allow them these opportunities to practice leadership. And once you have your first list, your leadership skills that you want your people to experience, you can determine sort of which ones are age appropriate for each group. There will likely be an order to some of them, skills that you need to be ready to learn another level of skills. And of course, there may be skills that younger campers just aren't ready for yet. So put them in an order that makes sense for you and for your camp experience, and then put them into your camp's age categories. Step 2 for me is then to like brainstorm activities, big and small. And don't discount the small opportunities that you can add into your camp day or tweak existing activities to give campers ownership over themselves, their friends, their camp. Doing this activity at leadership training will also get input from your staff. So give your staff opportunities to understand why this is important and get their creative juices flowing. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, a very short list of skills campers can learn, Gab has already touched on a couple, would be empathy, being okay to make mistakes, naming their own feelings, and then figuring out the next steps of what to do about those feelings. It's a great time to learn and practice gender neutral terms, or a growth mindset, or consent, debating different ideas without getting angry with each other, dealing with social anxiety. Like, I mean, the list is endless. So sitting down now to come up with that list, you could send it out to past and future staff members, ask for their ideas and their input, and call that list down to something that's workable, that will allow you time in the months before the summer to assess your camp day, see what opportunities exist to teach these skills already, which ones could be tweaked, and maybe what new positive rituals you can create to begin intentionally building future leaders right now. And like most things we suggest here on Camp Code, don't try to do it alone. Reach out not only to your staff, your alumni, or parents who may work in education or childcare and get their input. What a great marketing tool to be putting it out there that this is an important aspect of your camper's experience that you want to put even more effort into before next summer. So for me, it's like win, win, win. Okay, so before we continue with actual ideas and some practical tips to develop leadership potential in our campers, we have some words about our amazing sponsor.
One of the things I love most about the camp industry is how much sharing happens. And at this point in the show, where we normally are telling you about our awesome sponsor, Ultra Camp, today I want to tell you to check out the free guide that's offered by Ultra Camp titled 5 Unique Ways to Connect with Campers Outside of Camp. Connection is at the core of what we do, and our camp families need it now more than ever. And when you visit ultracampmanagement.com/camp code, you can download this free guide and find out more about Ultra Camp's transparent and flexible pricing. They offer no long-term contracts, clear pricing with no hidden costs, low minimum entry, and flexible payment terms. Ultra Camp's goal is to provide resources so their clients can spend more time in camp doing what they do best. If this all doesn't sound like your registration software, don't you think it should? You can visit their website, ultracampmanagement.com/camp code, and set up a time to chat.
And what a great resource from Ultra Camp. Remember a couple of weeks ago when we had Kim Acock on the podcast, and she talked about the fact that people need to connect before they can commit. So that goes for staff, for families, for campers, all of that. So what a great resource. Okay, so now that we've got the why and the how out of the way, we want to share some ideas, some practical tips and tricks that folks can add this summer into their camp programs to install that sense of leadership in our campers. So Ruby, let's start with you. What have you got?
I want to lean on the best model I feel like I've seen from this is I was fortunate to go to a K-8 school growing up, and there were so many different situations where there was mixed age programming, where especially where like the younger kids would put on a performance and the older kids would come in and be like, oh, this is so awesome, and demonstrate being good audience members and participants. One of the things we do is the first grade pet show. And so all the first graders would bring their pet to school that day, or the parents usually would, and they would sit there with their pet, and everybody else in school would come around and walk around and talk to each of the kids. Oh, tell me about your pet, and oh, can I pet him, and whatever. So I didn't have any pets growing up. So I brought a stuffed animal because that was okay. That was something we were allowed to do. And so I brought a stuffed animal that meant a lot to me. It was a koala. And the way that the older students still were like, oh, let me pet your koala, this is so cool. And my animal was not nearly as cool as like the girl who brought the horse, right? Or all the really cute cuddly dogs, right? I mean, right, like I had a very mediocre, but they were so kind and never made me feel strange or weird about not having a pet. I already felt enough of that on my own. They built me up, and that was so cool. So I want you to think about that kind of idea, where can you set up situations where your younger campers can, show something of value and have the older campers validate it. And I think that happens a lot of times with like variety shows or talent shows or skit nights. I think that's a pretty common time, but there may be kids who they're never going to get up on stage. So is it an art show that they can do from some of the crafts that they've created? I also think about that there's some element of whether it's elected or nominated or whatever it might be, but are there other student or younger or like camper leaders? So they're older campers, so that as your campers progress through their time at camp, they know that at some point when I'm that age group, I could be that leader, that like peer leader. Mm-hmm. And that was something we had at that K-8 school too. And there were several different opportunities for that as well. So I think finding those places for the mixed age programming. And then there's one other just like quick idea I want to share with you, which is I did a special program when I was a camp director called Camp Director for the Day. And it was an elective program. Kids got to sign up for it if they wanted to do it. It had a group of like 10 little, like very type A personalities. We gave them all clipboards and pencils. And we did things like take pictures at the director's desk and, talked about, they got to have a like sit down Q&A session with one of the camp directors.
Amazing.
It was so much fun.
I am dying. I love this idea so much. And I can just picture all the clipboards. Like I have those campers in my head right now. Like I'm ready to go.
So one of the things that we did at the end of the day their last project was they had to go through the lost and found and see if any of the lost and found stuff had names in it, and then figure out a system for connecting those items back to the person who it belonged to. And so we looked for names. We also encouraged them to look at stuff and be like, oh yeah, that's my cabin mate's blah. I've seen that blanket or that t-shirt or whatever. And it was its own like team building initiative in and of itself. I set very loose boundaries and just said like, this is your task. How are you going to do it? And they just ran with it. And so again, like I took that idea straight from my school that used to have the like principal for the day thing that could be won in an auction that raised money for the school. So I think we can take some of these things that you see in other places and apply them directly at camp.
I love that. I love that. We did something similar too, where one year at girls camp, we had big sisters, little sisters, and paired them up so that there were a couple of times throughout the week where there was, an intentional time set aside for the big sister, little sister to get together and either do a skill together or, prepare something together for a talent show or sit down and read or the little ones prepared questions to ask the older ones about what's it like in grade 6 or, things like that. But it was just a really positive experience for both ends of that. And so, yeah, and I think I took that one from a school experience as well, Ruby. So great ideas. Okay, Gabz, what have you got?
Those schools, there's some smart people at them schools. We're doing in the process of, of still doing some of our hiring. And I was talking to somebody that was applying for our leadership team. And I love talking to those individuals because at that point, hopefully they're at that point where they're very aware there's a lot of intentionality behind what is done at camp, but they're also just as aware that they don't know how to execute that intentionality. So there's some interesting conversations I find that come from that. And my question was, I was asking this individual, why do you want to work at camp? And, she was saying experience and leadership opportunities and all that. And I said, well, what do you think camp for you has taught you? That's one of the most valuable lessons. And she paused and she thought, and she said, as a camper, I was taught we teach campers that it's okay to bother staff members. Like that's an active lesson that I realized as a staff member. We teach campers that it's okay to bother, to ask for what you want. And for me, I said, Alex, I'm going to say her name fully, Alex Brooks, because I thought that was a brilliant observation. Where, our goal is to teach campers to take up space, and it's also to teach campers to be aware of the space that they're taking up. We're trying to teach. Those are the two things we're trying to teach them, and I find that at camp there's so many opportunities, and I like to look at them as opportunity moments, opportunity situations where there are disagreements, where campers are having a hard time, where all of that stuff that can be tough for staff members to just reframe it and call it that, instead of saying like a problematic camper, it's an opportunity camper, because we have the opportunity to finally teach them this one thing. And for our campers that don't take up space, so the ones that don't, they're always saying, oh, you can borrow this, or they're always saying like, I don't mind whatever the group wants. We call that an opportunity camper because our goal is to get that camper to say no at some point, or our goal is to get that camper to speak up for what they actually want, despite what the group wants. And so for me, working with our staff members, I want our staff members to look at how are we teaching campers actively to take up space, and how are we teaching campers to actively be aware of the space that they're taking up. And I agree with Ruby with the mixed age programming. I find that so helpful. And within our organization, our same aged campers stay in cabins and eat at tables with similar age as well. But during activities, because it's independent activities they choose, they get to choose those activities. The program is developed in a way that each camper can work on their own levels. But within those levels, there is a passing on of knowledge and a passing on of skills. Mm-hmm. And so it's already developed into the program, and it's so easy to do. And the reason why, we do that is because sometimes also as an instructor, when you're teaching something, there's that older campers that just require that one-on-one time because maybe they're learning how to roll that kayak, or maybe they're, doing that really specific thing in sailing, or whatever your camp activity programs are. And by having them teach, obviously we know that helps with leadership. And then you can spend that time with that camper just one-on-one, but you can also debrief with them. How did it go when you're teaching this? And of course, you're always watching out, and there's instructions on how to do that. There's such a sense of pride in campers that teach other campers in something that they're passionate about. And there's such an element of that for that younger camper to say, wow, this camper is taking time to look out for me. But I try to focus with my staff actively, helping campers take up space and helping campers see the space that they take up, and how can we look at those interactions with campers as opportunity moments, or an opportunity camper, because we want them to have those difficult times so we can have that moment to reflect with them.
Brilliance from Camp Woro. I love it. I love it. I want to talk about being really, really intentional. And so I want to share with you a little bit about a project that I created a couple of years ago for a week-long program for teen campers. It was called STAND, and each of the letters stands for a different lesson that we focused on. So the S was for social graces, T, take responsibility for your own actions, A, ask intelligent questions, N, never miss an opportunity to be kind, and D, do all things with integrity. So we had 5 full days and 2 half days with our campers who were aged 13 to 16. And in addition to the amazing week of regular programming that was offered, we added in really intentional leadership development. So each morning we began the day with a short story or a lesson, which lots of camps do at the flag when they raise the flag, all of that kind of stuff. But the lesson was really on the theme of the day. We then spent 1 hour after breakfast each morning together as a whole camp diving into the topic. And so we had games and crafts and skits and videos and discussions and so on. We had fun announcements or really short activities at lunch to again reinforce the learning of that day. Again, at supper, we did some sort of activity really short, and then ended our campfires at night with a Vesper focused again on what we were talking about, like social graces on day 1. And then at the end of each morning hour that we had together on our topic, we always ended with world vision. So we would talk about what our world would look like today if everybody used, for example, on day 1, social graces. So it was all of the teens' input. And we also asked things like, what can we do today and this week to practice those social graces so we're really good at it when we return home to the outside world, which is not summer camp and maybe not quite as open and friendly. And we made a list with their input, and of course, input from staff who had been front loaded about their expectations of their behavior and input during that experience. But being really purposeful with expectations of, say, social graces was actually pretty new to some of the campers. I couldn't get over that some of them had never shaken anyone's hand before. They'd never properly introduced themselves or said hello to people that they didn't know. But on this day 1, after like 1 hour of being in completely intentional, things happened. And I witnessed small changes at first, but once it gained momentum, it was honestly like a landslide. So campers held doors open for one another. They made eye contact when they spoke. They offered seats when people came to join their group. They introduced themselves to new people. Of course, they used please and thank you and you're welcome a lot. They helped one another with tasks without being asked, and they made sure that nobody felt left out. Now, camp is always a great place for people to feel at home, and I've witnessed that for years as a camp director, but I'm telling you, this was different. And it still plays in my mind as one of the greatest weeks of camp I've ever experienced. And it was a slow start, especially since we started with social graces and campers were incredibly awkward and uncomfortable that very first hour. And it was funny to watch. But it picked up speed really quickly, and the intention behind it kind of took hold of everybody. And it just gave us this incredible week together. And the changes that we saw were way more than I could have ever hoped for. We challenged them with really high expectations, and they rose to each and every one and surpassed them. And I got more positive parent feedback after that week than in any of my 15 years directing. Parents would call and say, I don't know what you did to my kid this week, because they've been coming to your camp for like 8 years, but something is different, and in a positive way. So when we took that time to really focus on what was important, on what we thought our campers could handle, even if some of it was a bit challenging, and we enforced it with the staff being on board, when we added camp creativity to it to ensure that it was fun and engaging, the results were really worth it. So I encourage you to create your own leadership week at camp this summer. And if it's new to you, try like 1 week of the summer. See how it goes, and then reflect and reassess to add more weeks of it in 2023. The other weeks of 2022, though, be sure that you add a few things each day to your program that highlights leadership opportunities, and be certain you let your campers in on your plan. Share with them that you're working on leadership skills and tell them why. Catch them doing it right. And as Michael Brandwein says, DLP it, describe it, label it, praise it. If you just want to focus on one skill each week, that's awesome too. So think of all the kinds of things that you could be able to do, and start planning now. You know the camp staff will be on board fully, and they'll get creative and excited about it and join in. But this week, it was an exhausting week, I'm not going to lie to you, but it was incredible, the results that we saw out of it. And the following couple of years, some of the best staff camp has ever had, because they happened to be at that week of Teen Week. All right, Ruby, anything else to add?
Yeah, just to echo, I think a lot of some of what you just said, and kind of sum up that when you are a leader, you become a better team member in the future. And I think about the fact that I have run organizations or managed part-time employees, and now that I'm in more of a situation where I am a part-time employee, or I, am working on a team, that I feel like I have so much more empathy for the leader, and some of the struggles, just having a little bit more perspective on what are some of the sorts of things people bring to a team outside of what you bring to a team. I think it has made me a better employee across the board. And so similarly, like if you want your campers to be easier to work with, give them that opportunity to have to struggle as the leader a little bit and see all the different things that they have to manage. And that can look in so many different ways. Even I think back again to school, like there was the line leader, we had that kind of like leader of the day. So is there a way, even with your youngest cabins, to have that person who is the leader, and how does that evolve or change, and that definition, how kids understand leadership? I think that's something they need to be wrestling with and thinking about all throughout their time at camp.
Great. Thanks, Ruby. How about you, Gabz? Anything else to add today?
We say this often, camp is more than just fun. And I think that sometimes it's hard with staff members, because that's a lot of the leadership opportunities that we have for campers are in the moment with staff members, are in the moment where we're just helping campers understand the impact that they have. And that can make, there's so much learning that comes from this. I would suggest look at your schedule and see where you can help staff members process and debrief with the campers on a maybe daily basis, or on an every other day, or make it as special occasions, having that process, just reflecting on what you did well that day, and how did you impact somebody in a positive way, and have that feedback from other people. How did you experience that person really, really goes a long way. And sometimes you don't need to necessarily create a whole new program, or, I'm certainly doing the camp director for the day piece. I also love the social graces. We're going to get to recap, but basically, debriefing and reflecting on your day, or even after an experience, is a huge leadership moment. And if you guide your staff members and you provide the space to do that, teaching your campers those leadership experiences and having it sink in, it's already done. Camp is already experiential. We've already done it. We crushed it. Like, we're nailing that. So just that reflection piece is going to really, really help with sticking with some of the lessons that we want campers to absorb into their muscle memory.
Great. Thanks, Gab. I just have a couple other really quick examples.
You don't
So
say. I am shocked.
If you want to teach connection and understanding, you could have a question of the day every day at lunch and have campers pair up with somebody new every day and have them share their answers. So it's a great way to teach social skills, to make new friends, to learn about yourself, all of which, of course, can build confidence. And you could even have a box where campers submit the questions and you can pull them out. I mean, I would go through them first before I start reading them out loud, but just to have different questions of the day. You could teach campers about problem solving by creating posters around camp with the 5 steps of problem solving. So be sure that your staff is trained on it and make sure everybody's prepared to call it out when they see it happening so that everybody can share in the learning and bask in the glory of doing it. So you may even choose, if your campers are younger, to focus on just 1 step a day. So for example, day 1 is all about identifying the problem. So describing the issue and learning to be as specific as possible. And you could set up a game to help campers learn through experience. Day 2 would be brainstorming solutions. So I'm picturing like a really fun camp character all dressed up who arrives in the dining hall during a meal with a problem and asks the campers to help brainstorm ideas that might solve the problem. And I'm kind of thinking younger kids at this point. Day 3 are considering possible consequences. So this sounds like the making of a really fun activity. In my brain, it involves buckets of water maybe and getting staff wet. I don't know, but possible consequences. Day 4, you're picking the best solution and trying it out. And day 5, checking how it's working. So like so many fun ideas buzzing around in my head right now, but you could also give this 5-step plan to your counselors at staff training and get them to come up with 5 short activities that could be done with a specific age group for the week and get them to plan something fun and interesting and inspiring, because then you're also helping your staff learn and grow. So my point is, like, make your list, determine a specific set of skills that you want to teach each week of the summer, and work out ways now, big and small, that you can teach these really specific lifelong learnables. Chances are, if you go through your day at camp, you're already doing many of these without having sort of intentionally thought about it, but think of how much further you can go. And my last thing would be to not forget to get your campers on board for this. So prep the excitement for this. You could send out a series of emails or Instagrams the week before campers arrive, sharing your excitement for all the skills they're going to learn at camp. You could add a little hint about this new addition to your program with your posts. You could start by explaining how much you've been thinking about them over the school year and you want to do something really special for them this summer. And with each additional post that goes out only to them, you're revealing a hint about the time you're going to get to spend together, that space you're going to create, the exciting opportunities to renew old friendships and begin new ones, and share and grow and become their best selves. So really, it shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes a day. So I would be trying to send out 2 or 3 a week before campers arrive if you can. And then I would be sending some of that stuff out into your community, not just through the summer, but through the whole school year, giving shout outs to campers who are doing amazing things in their communities, especially ones that maybe highlight skills you've worked on at camp. It is never too early to teach kids the value of leadership and skills and responsibility. And if you do this throughout the summer, just think how incredibly prepared your young staff will be when they show up for staff training in 2032. Wow, that sounds like a really far off time. But, if you start now with your 7-year-olds, 2032, think of what they're going to be ready to do by the time they become staff. All right, we are in our podcast in that famous spot that we call the Camp Code Recap.
Camp Code Recap, Camp Code Recap. First and foremost, Ruby is back. Bow, 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 bow. Woo, woo, woo. And we are talking about how to create future leaders. And when we say future leaders, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be staff members, because those little individuals, those ankle biters, are going out to the outside world, and they can have a positive impact in the cafeteria, on the bus, at home. We want to give them those life skills. So when we are doing such things, of course, start with our staff members. Let's ask our staff members, what is the value of camp? What life skills are we hoping our campers to bring outside to the outside world? What do we want them to bring back in their luggage, if you will? And some of those things could be learning how to name your feelings, empathy, conflict resolution. There's so many different things. And then help your staff members get specific on how can we intentionally teach us to our campers. You can involve your campers in the why, behind the scenes of why we're doing what we are doing. So you can have programs like Stand, create quote of the day, problem of the day, maybe a 5-part leadership program. Again, involve your staff members, because if they know why they are doing what they're doing, it's going to be easier for them to execute it. If you want to boil it down, or you're saying, I have so much to do, I can't start anything, don't worry about it. Maybe you could just step back and say, hey, is there a reflection moment that we can have with campers? Maybe it's at the end of the day, where campers say, this is what I appreciated from somebody else, and this is what I appreciated about myself. Look, we just talked about appreciation. Those are leadership skills. What I like to look at is, how much space am I taking up, and how much space are we taking up for ourselves. So space is very important, and just those little opportunity moments where campers get into conflict and teaching them how to resolve those conflict issues is super, super helpful. And if you want to get them into exciting to be part of the camp professional team, maybe have a camp director for the day. I love this idea. I'm definitely going to be stealing it. And I'm just so grateful that Ruby is back today. So many more things that happened on the podcast. I can't remember it all, but that is recap for today.
Didn't you miss that, Ruby? You missed the recap.
I missed you all a lot. Don't get me wrong. Oh, so nice.
All right. Before we wrap up with our best practice from Ruby this week, here is how you can get involved with us and join our conversation. Use that hashtag camp code and let us know topics you'd like us to discuss, any guests you would recommend that we talk to, great leadership training tips that you have to share with us. We would love to hear from you. We are all about sharing in this industry. So tell us your thoughts on this episode as well, and you can use the hashtag camp code. If you found the podcast to be useful, you can leave us a rating and a review in your podcasting app. Your feedback helps us keep the show going. And here is how you can get in touch with each one of us individually. Ruby.
You can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com. You can also find me on Instagram @rubyoutdoors. You can also find me on Twitter @rubylyn85.
Thanks, Ruby. And Gab, how do we get a hold of you?
You can get in touch with me at info@waro.com, OUAREAU.com, or you can follow me on Instagram @Gabrielle Rail, and Rail takes 2 L's.
Thank you. You can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, or find me on Twitter @Topaz. And for our next topic, we're going to kind of take off from what we talked about today and talk about transitioning from the camper to the staff experience. And that will be the 2022 edition of that particular podcast. All right. This week's best practice will be brought to you by Ruby. So take it away.
Not right now, but when I was in North Carolina, I led a backpacking trip this last weekend, and we were under a burn ban. And one of the nice things about this backpacking trip, I was teaching winter backpacking skills. We wanted to build a fire, but often you don't do a fire during backpacking. And we also couldn't build one because there was a burn ban in the county, because we haven't gotten much rain lately, which, by the way, is something that I think we're going to continue to see camps have to deal with. And so how do you have a campfire experience without actually being able to build a fire? So we were able to, we were at a campsite that had a fire ring. So we took Nalgenes and put headlamps around the Nalgene, so it kind of glowed through it, so it was colorful, right? And so we each kind of contributed a log on the fire. And then I had some fairy lights that I had bought previously that I brought with me that have kind of this like, breathing, like ember like setting.
Cool.
And so I put those around, and it really, I mean, we found ourselves like sitting around the fire, putting our feet up against the rocks.
Yes.
It's not the same, but it gave a bit of that feeling. So if you find yourself needing to create that campfire ambiance, that's something you could do inside with all electric stuff, or all battery operated stuff. And you don't have to worry about lighting the forest on fire. So that's my best practice for today.
Pack fairy lights. Always bring fairy lights wherever you go.
Everywhere. I bring them everywhere now. No, it's everywhere.
I have them everywhere as well, and I don't regret it.
Well, that wraps things up for today, folks. Go out and buy your fairy lights if you don't already own some. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. There are amazing people there with a lot of wisdom to share, so look them up and give them a listen. From all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.